You're listening to Criticaleye's Asia Leadership Podcast. Criticaleye is a global membership community with over 2 decades of experience supporting senior executives in their roles. We work with board-level executives, giving them opportunities to build their knowledge, skills, and access independent reference points outside of their immediate networks. Whether you're stepping up into a more senior role or aspiring to do so, looking to hone high-level stakeholder relationships, drive operational performance, build your own personal resilience as a leader, or have longer-term career goals such as moving into a plural career, Criticaleye's approach supports a range of leadership challenges and ambitions.
Hello and welcome to the Criticaleye Asia podcast, Inspiring Leaders to Succeed. I'm Yu-Wen Hsiao, Marketing and Communications Manager at APAC at Criticaleye, and I'm delighted to be your host for today's episode. Our podcast covers topics at the forefront of business leaders' minds, always topical, thought-provoking, and designed to provide insights from leaders and peers delivering amazing results, unpacking leadership and making it bite-sizable. And in today's episode, we'll be focusing on a crucial thing for leaders in Asia, succeeding as a regional CEO, with a focus on building strong relationship with the board for success. So in today's business world, especially in Asia, forging the partnership with board is crucial for driving growth, navigating change, and ensuring the alignment for strategic goals. And when CEOs and their boards collaborate effectively, it also helps the organization to stay resilient, adaptable, and also ready to face new challenges in rapidly changing environment. And I'm delighted to be joined by Terence Quek, the CEO of Singapore Institute of Directors. Terence has intensive experience in organizational development, governance, and leadership, and he has played a key role in shaping best practice for boards across the region. Terence, welcome, and it's a pleasure to have you with us today. And before we dive into the conversation, could you please expand my introduction and share a bit more about your background and your career journey?
Sure. Thank you very much for having me, Yu-Wen. My name is Terence. I'm the CEO of Singapore Institute of Directors, or SID in short. Prior to joining SID, I spent 13 years with the Singapore Navy. So my main role was a combat officer, and then I moved up through the ranks, spending about 4 years of my 13-year contract at the headquarters, setting up the corporate comms department. I then transited into the entrepreneurial world, where I set up a consultancy with some friends, focusing very much on strategic communications. Grew that for about 4 years, and then had the pleasure of merging with the subsidiary of an American company that focuses on psychometric instruments, and then I became the regional CEO. The original idea was to grow that business for 3 to 5 years and then have a planned exit. I had far too much fun, so I stayed on for about nearly 10 years and exited just right after COVID. So looking into, having 13 years in the military and about 14 years as an entrepreneur, I then thought, what's next? And the Singapore Institute of Directors came along, offered me this really fantastic opportunity. So now I'm kind of like in my 3rd season of my professional life, running the organization, which has already been around for more than 25 years. So having a ball of a time, doing a lot of work, uplifting directorship profession, as well as championing good governance in Singapore.
Terence, from your introduction, you obviously have such a diverse and fascinating career, such as from your time in the military to leading the strategic communications and organization development. So I think it's really clear that your unique experience can definitely shape your perspective on the leadership and also governance. So with your experience working around multiple board members around different industry, as you mentioned, and you must have been seeing what makes the CEO and board relationship really work. So what do you think are the key elements for building trust and alignment between CEOs and their boards, especially in Asia, fast-paced and also diverse business environment?
Yeah, so I've had a fortune of working with different CEOs in my time when I was running a regional company focusing on organization and people development. And obviously right now, because of the work that SID does, I have a lot of interactions with board directors. So I had the pleasure of seeing things from both sides. So coming from the CEO perspective, as well as listening to board directors and how they are managing the CEOs. So your question really, it's about how do we build trust between boards as well as management. And as I was reflecting on my own personal leadership experience, I think one of the key things that is really important is relationship. Clearly, board directors, CEOs, we're all human beings. So essentially, there's nothing very different between a board and a management from a human aspect. And if you think about the basic relationship between two individuals, it's really about how do you build that trust and alignment is really communication. So I would say that one of the key ingredients of building trust and alignment between the board and the management is about communication. So think in terms of how do I communicate with the board, or if I'm a board director, how do I then communicate with management? Now, obviously, things are not as straightforward, right? Because I remember this phrase from way back in the Navy where a commander used to say, my stand depends on where I sit. So if you think about it from that point of view, if I'm a CEO, my job is to manage the day-to-day operations and obviously to translate the strategies of the board into actions. And I am accountable to the board. So how do I then ensure that I have that trust and alignment with the board, especially if I'm supposed to also have my own ideas? So that communication is really important. How do I communicate my day-to-day plans to the board, but in a way that it's packaged for boards to understand, because their job is to govern. So boards are not there to do the day-to-day running, and therefore the kind of information that management surfaces to the board, it's meant to be concise, compact, kind of almost like a dashboard. So if you think about it from a very practical point of view, what the CEO needs to think about is what kind of information and how do I package that information in a way that I communicate to the board would support their decision making. And likewise, from the board's point of view, their job is not to do the day-to-day, but they are not here to order the CEO around either. But the board has fiduciary duties, and their responsibility is to ensure that the organization is well governed in the best interest of all the stakeholders. So how do you then translate the ideas at the board level to the CEO without coming across as though you're telling him what to do? So in that sense, the dynamics are quite different, which is why for the management, the CEO, they will have to figure out how do I hone my skills to communicate with the board? And for the board, how do I hone my skills so that I can influence the management? So key to building the trust between both board and management really lies in the art and science, perhaps, of communication.
So Terence, you mentioned trust is really a key, but how are some of the common challenges you think the CEO might face when they face the board, and then how they're gonna overcome these of the challenges?
Yeah, so I think in this fast-paced world, information changes so quickly. So the very moment you kind of already thought you understood what's going on, things change, the variables change, factors have changed. So I think that could be a challenge, right? The frequency and the intensity of the changes. So that could pose a challenge in terms of communication, which is why it still goes back to building that relationship. And to simplify things, I think if you have a very big board, then from the CEO's point of view, the key person to start with, obviously you want to build relationship with all the board directors, but the key thing really is to build that relationship with the chairperson of the board, because the chairperson is responsible for the board, the CEO is responsible for the management team. So the two are leaders of the same organization, and precisely because things are moving at such a fast pace, CEO and the chair really need to be on the same page, and that's the reason why the communication needs to be very strong, build a strong relationship so that you can be very agile in the way that you're making decisions, you're able to translate all the changes into your plans as quickly as possible.
Well, Terence, I think transparency and confidentiality is also the key for the trust, right? So how do you think the CEO can balance that transparency and confidentiality when communicating with the board, ensuring that the right information is shared at the right time?
Yeah, I would say that this is maybe my own basic principles, right? If you just got to be honest, right? So if you feel that something is not working well, don't spring any surprises on the board, right? So I have a really good relationship with my chair. Most of the time, we discuss difficult issues. And for me, my number one rule, if something that comes up that I think would be of concern for the entire organization or for the board, the chairperson will be alerted right away. Simply because I feel that sometimes two heads is better than one. Obviously, I'm given the trust to run the organization, and I should really think about how to come up with the solutions to solve the problems. But I really hate to surprise the board, especially the chairperson, right? So my that's my own philosophy in terms of making sure that there's no surprises, because at the end, I need to know that we are all on the same team. We're just operating at different angles, looking out for the organization, and that, I think, in a way allows that trust to be sustained. It continues to strengthen that relationship between the board and the management. So I wouldn't hold back information, but again, I would like to also ask myself, how do I better package this information, because the board's time is also precious, right? How do I package this information so that they really understand the crux of the matter? And more strategic level, what are the risks involved, what are some of the opportunities that we may want to think about. So it's my job to package that information, but it's not about withholding the information, but really to package that so that the board can really appreciate what is really going on at the management level, and at the same time to give them the assurance that I'm on top of things. And if if the worst case scenario has happened, I'm really losing control, hopefully that doesn't happen. If that really does happen, then that's where that honesty with the chair must come in, right? Because without that level of honesty, the board can't do their job. And the management team will always be felt as though they are keeping something, and that's the easiest way to break a trust. That's nobody any good.
So I think one thing that Terence, I'm quite curious about is obviously the board members that have quite a lot of people on the board. So like with the different voices around the boardroom, and then how would you feel like the CEO can use or the strategy that they can apply to create an environment where the different opinions are welcome and also the alignment still reach on the key issue?
Well, I would say that speaking from my own point of view, it starts with me and how I look at my board. So I don't really think about the total number of people on the board, but I think about if I have X number of people on my board, then that represents that diverse viewpoints that I can potentially tap into. So that is tremendous, right? Think about the amount of viewpoints, perspectives, experiences that is going to help enrich the decision-making process. So that's my starting point. So don't look at the board as though they are an enemy. Don't look at the board as though they're there to be a hindrance, but I'm looking at them as a huge resource. It's a wealth of resource that I can now tap into to make sure that the decisions that we make as a team is holistic. So that's the starting point. How do I approach looking at my board and the mindset? And then the next thing then is to make sure that there are some processes in place, right? So most boards that are effective, typically when they're running meetings, there's an agenda, right? And so the job of the management is to put together papers that we want to have certain strategy level discussions. So it's my job to ensure that the papers are concise, it captures the key essence, and point the board towards exactly what is the problem here that we're trying to solve, or what is the point that we're trying to be discussing, spending an hour or less to really discuss upon. So it's the process, right? And of course, we leave it to the chairperson who would be effective in managing the board meeting, just to make sure that items are given sufficient time for discussions. So if you put these factors together, then chances are it would make for a more productive relationship between the board and the management, and obviously tapping into the best of both worlds.
So Terence, I think building in a strong relationship and trust is really fundamental for the CEO and the board relationship. But in today's fast-moving business environment, agility is also important as the trust, I would say. So from your perspective, how can the CEOs foster an agile mindset within their boards, ensuring that they're able to make a quick and informed decisions while also aligning with their long-term strategy?
Yeah, so I think don't wait for a crisis to happen to start building a relationship relationship, right? So I think relationship, it is hard work. You need to continuously maintain that relationship. So build that so that when there are crisis that happens, you're not spending time figuring out, second guessing. Everybody's already on the same page. So I would say that there's a lot of pre-work that has to be done, and you just never know when a crisis or a surprise may happen for the organization. So I would say that's the starting point. And of course, going back to the point about communication again, I think if we are having a meeting discussing the strategy over the next 10 years, it's very different from having a meeting to manage a crisis incident that has happened. So clearly the style of running the meeting will be very different. The kind of conversation that we'll be having will be quite different as well.
So Terence, as you just mentioned, a big part of agility is also ensuring open and timely communication. So from your experience, what can CEOs do to encourage more constructive and efficient discussion within the boardroom?
Yeah, so again, go back to the chair. I mean, as a CEO, if you feel that you're not getting the kind of robust conversations at the board as you like, or maybe the ideas or the guidance from the board or strategies from the board is not as clear, I would go to the chair, right? Have that one-to-one conversation. This is what I'm observing. This is what I'm hoping to be getting. This is, so have that conversation with the chair, because at the end of the day, it's the chair's role to manage the board, right? So which is why I mentioned earlier to go back to have that really strong relationship with the chair, so that you can then have that open communication with the chair to say, look, maybe we're not getting as much guidance from that specific discussion. What do you think? So have that open conversation with the chair and leave the chair to manage the board.
Terence, I'm quite curious because sometimes I think agility is also require change, and not everyone would be comfortable with that as well. So how can the CEO effectively manage resistance with the board when faster decision making or new approaches are needed?
Well, I guess everything is contextual as well, right? But if you look at most functioning boards, typically a robust conversation happens. There's a debate. Boards are encouraged to bring their own perspectives. It's not about everybody agreeing with everybody just for the sake of, congeniality, but everybody should feel independent to have their voice heard. And then after a robust discussion, if there's still a deadlock on decision, typically people put it to a vote, right? So if there is an equal number of votes for yes and equal number of votes for no, then that's where the chair steps in to make a decision, right? So if you think about a fully functioning board, then there is a process already in place. So it's not about personality per se. It's not about people being uncomfortable about decisions that's to be made. I think it's more about respecting the process. Is there sufficient conversation around that particular topic? Is the debate robust? And then was there opportunity for every director to voice their points of view, because that's exactly what they're there for? And is there a process to ensure that votes are counted, and then the chair would then have to step in as well?
So Terence, we have discussed the importance of agility in decision making, but an often overlooked aspect of CEO and board relationship is continuous development. So as organizations grow and face new challenges, maintaining and involving the CEO and board relationship is a key. So what strategies would you recommend for CEOs to continue building and strengthening this relationship over time?
So if the question is about strengthening relationship, then I think it's about a few things, right? One is obviously paying attention to communication. So communication is two ways, right? So as a CEO, I would ask myself, how am I improving my communication style? Is there anything that I can do differently to make the communication more effective? Especially if I'm communicating to a huge board, right? There's a lot of different people on the board. So I would ask for feedback. And again, there are various ways to do so. So having conversations with the chair, and also maybe having side conversations with the directors, just casually asking, is there anything that you observed that I could have done differently? I mean, that's my style. So I think different CEOs may have different ways of doing it, but getting feedback so that I can continuously adjust my communication style is important, because at the end of the day, I have a job to do. The board has a job to do. So we need to both meet in the middle, right? So focusing on improving the communication. And the other part of it is also, I think at a personal level, is about putting aside my ego. I need to be very clear what my role as a CEO of the organization is, what my job is meant to be. but don't let ego get in the way, because at the end of the day, different people have different styles. There could be some board members in the way that they put things across could come across a little bit more brash, or, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater just because I don't like the way this person has put certain things across. I mean, go beyond that. Look at what exactly is the message. What is the content? Because that could be something that's really important. It just came in a really, unpleasant kind of a package, right? So the second part of it is really checking my ego at the door, but really focusing on the job and the task at hand, and then just, continuously improve that relationship with the board directors, just to make sure that we are able to communicate clearly, openly, and transparently.
So Terence, we talk about the strategy for strengthening the board relationship, but it's also helpful to look at the real world examples, I think. So one way the leaders can do this, I think maybe would be by learning from their peers as well. So through the partnership like Criticaleye and Singapore Institute of Directors, we host quite a lot of the roundtables discussion where leaders can come along and then share their insights and interest ideas on the variety of relevant and emerging issues. So from your perspective, what value do these sort of the discussion offer, and how can they help foster stronger CEO and board relationship?
Yeah, so I think organizations like SID, Criticaleye, I think we play a really critical role, if you ask me, for both CEOs, for board directors as well. One of the things that that both our organizations do is actually to create a community of peers, right? So there's so much that you can learn from books, from watching documentaries, from listening to podcasts. I mean, these are great, and you should do all these. But I think there's a lot that you can also learn from peers. Getting plugged in into the ecosystem, learning from one another, and that's where communities like the SID community, the Criticaleye community, becomes very powerful and rich resource. I always feel that leadership journey, like what some people describe, can be very lonely. But I feel that with organizations like SID, with Criticaleye, I don't think we need to be lonely on this journey. And in fact, there's a lot of things that we can learn from one another. And that's why I think the work that we do is really important.
Thank you so much, Terence. We have explored how CEOs can strengthen their relationship with their boards, drive agility in decision making, and also ensure long-term success through continuous development. So, Terence, as we wrap up today, what's the most important piece of advice would you want to give to the CEOs looking to excel in their roles and making the meaningful impact?
Yeah, so I remember this phrase or this quote from long before, and I think it's still very, very apt today. And this phrase is learn, unlearn, relearn. So I think as a CEO, the higher you climb, even as a board director, I think there's so much more that we can still learn. But there's a fair amount that we may need to unlearn, because there could be some habits that has served us well in the past, but maybe those habits may not help us succeed today. So we need to unlearn some of these things. And then once you have unlearned some of these things, then you may need to relearn. So how do we communicate differently, especially with a new generation of workforce? How do we communicate with the new generation of workforce? So there's some relearning that needs to be done as well. So that would be my advice, really to learn, unlearn, and relearn.
Thank you so much, Terence, for sharing such invaluable advice. So I'm pretty sure our listeners, especially CEOs, will leave with a deeper understanding of how they navigate these sort of challenges and will be inspired to apply your insights into their day-to-day work and also enhance their leadership journey. Thank you so much, Terence, for today.
Thank you very much.